Jeannie, I know this is going to sound weird but I need your help. Oh, don't worry, I have money, she said. No, Mark laughed, when we walk in the store, I have a friend who I'm trying to impress, would you pretend to be my girlfriend? Mark asked. What? Jeannie replied. The owner of the store is a friend of mine, and I want to impress him, Mark begged. Oh Mark, no, that would not be appropriate, I mean I just met you, and I don't know anything about you, it could get really uncomfortable. It's just a joke, and if you play along, I'll buy you a double scoop of vanilla ice cream, he interrupted. Jeannie wasn't going to take his first offer, with strawberry sprinkles, she countered. Done, Mark settled, he offered his hand to shake, Jeannie reluctantly shook it. The Oasis was a party store owned by Assad, a second-generation American citizen of Arabian descent. He inherited the store from his father, who bought it back in the 70s. Assad was a short, balding, overweight, middle-aged man, who wore several thick gold chains, and a Hawaiian-styled shirt. Mark thought Assad resembled a modern-day version of a disco dressing pimp. A real throwback from the 70s, a look that only Assad could pull off. The Oasis was a party store that primarily sold liquor, but over the years Assad had built it up to a first-class establishment. It was a commercial building in a residential neighborhood, and within a residential subdivision that was legal at that time, so his store was grandfathered in. Assad would not be granted a permit to rebuild his store at another location or even expand it outside of his legal restrictions. But it could stay where it was, and the white community, who hated it there, could do nothing about it. Assad had expanded it by adding additional freezers in the back, pizza ovens up front, remodeled the deli counter, put in flavored coffee machines, expanded the existing soda fountains to include frozen Slurpees, and now the newest addition was hand-dipped ice cream. He finally qualified as an agent for state treasury, so he sold lottery tickets as well. But a party store in an upscale subdivision was considered as tacky as it was convenient, no matter how first-rate. Some believed that a commercial building had no business in a predominantly upper-middle-class white residential neighborhood, and neither did its Arab owner. The white community that surrounded Assad were always overly polite to his face, and they all went to his store because it was very convenient, as opposed to the nearest supermarket that was easily 15 miles away. But Assad was no fool, and he knew he would never be accepted as one of them, the white establishment, who bought his goods but made fun of him behind his back. He would always be just another undesirable with money. Some regarded Assad no better than a low-life pimp, who could afford to golf at the most expensive resorts in the world, but every member would avoid him like the Black Plague because his money was just as illegitimate as he was. The other members of the subdivision would ask John, Mark's father, if there was anything that could be done about the store. Legally, the Homeowners Association, which John was a member of, could do nothing to overturn a federal law, but being a big-shot attorney downtown who had political connections, still made him look bad. So, the same people who went to Assad's store, spent money, shook hands, and were all smiles to his face, but were the same ones who tried to change the zoning laws to have Assad ousted behind his back, which of course was impossible. Mark's father himself wouldn't even go to his store, and he didn't like Mark hanging around Assad either, with the exception that Assad gave him a job during the summers. He liked the fact that his son was willing to work, and he thought a job would be a good experience for him. But Michigan was not California. It might have been known as a blue state, but not for its liberal views. Despite the inner city, the state as a whole still had a nonsense, work hard, play hard, working class mentality. Those who still had a job. Arabic business owners who were exempt from paying taxes, unlike every other hard-working, natural-born citizen, since the Jimmy Carter administration, and this secretly made them exempt to this day. This was all done through the Trilateral Commission, though no one knows, to this day, who they are or why they can decide racial, economic policy for the United States. This exemption was supposed to be temporary in nature, and for 7 years. But the owner could legally pass that exemption on to a blood relative thereafter, which extended this loophole forever. And that was the real reason. Dearborn, Michigan had acquired the second largest concentration of Arabs in the world, second only to the actual Middle Eastern countries they were native to, like Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and even Pakistan, and Afghanistan, who were still secretly at war with. Many cultures came to the United States, but not all of them owned their own businesses, and the Arabic population was the most alien to American culture, and not the most friendly or hospitable by comparison. They were very guarded and suspicious. Not the ideal trait, when dealing with the public. Yet despite all the racism, cultural differences, and language barriers, they thrived where every other failed. And nobody could connect the dots. Assad had the second generational disposition, and he wanted to be liked, despite the fact that he would never be accepted. So he played the game. Assad was good at remembering names, and if it was your birthday he would give you a pack of cigarettes or a six-pack on the house. Servicemen always got discounts, and he even refused to take their money if they were in uniform. He helped the elderly by carrying the heavier groceries to their cars. Assad had a real knack for making you like him when he wanted to. As far as Assad was concerned, no matter what they thought of him behind his back, as long as bought his shit, that was the only thing that really mattered. Assad didn't really care any more for Mark's father John, than John cared for him. But he loved Mark. And Mark thought Assad was cool as ice, God only knows why, but the two of them became the best of friends, despite their age, race, culture, and background differences. For one thing, no matter how old Mark was, Assad never treated him like a child. Assad always treated Mark as if he was actually more mature than his actual age. For example, Assad would openly curse in front of Mark, when they would watch wrestling or the baseball game on TV, usually when he was losing money on a bet. He started out only cursing in Arabic, Mukat Alam, but then as he got older, he would openly curse in English as well. Baseball could be complicated, so Assad would explain the finer points of the game, so Mark understood what was going on. Assad even promised to take him to a game during the season's opener at Comerica Park, if his dad let him. As Mark got older, Assad would tell him dirty jokes, make fun of the obnoxious white customers, and even let Mark flip through all the girly magazines he sold on the rack. One time he even let Mark try one of his illegal Cuban cigars. Yes, illegal. Cuba had pissed off the current president again, so he placed another embargo on them, and they both smoked one together in the back. But the absolute best was when Mark spotted Assad and four of his identical-looking brothers-in-laws, drunk off their asses, celebrating a wedding, and loading 4 kegs of beer into the back of their expensive SUVs. They were also passing around a fifth of Jack Daniels, and talking gibberish behind the dumpster as Mark approached them from behind. Mark, who was riding his bike on his way home after a hockey game that had run very late, because he walked up behind Assad, who had his back towards him, and surprised them all by standing next to Assad and wrapping his arm around him. Mark said something smart-ass, like, "I hope I got my arm around the right guy." Assad instantly translated what Mark had said into Arabic and everybody started laughing hysterically. Mark thought Assad had translated what he had said directly, but Assad had given his own interpretation, and it was more like, "Oh yeah, this is that crazy white motherfucker I was telling you about earlier," and then he handed Mark the bottle and put his arm around him in return. Everyone was drunk off their ass, and Mark had to even help Assad keep his balance as everyone came up to kiss Mark on the cheek, which is how his family greeted each other in their culture. The group then introduced themselves in Arabic, while Assad roughly translated what they said. Assad had made Mark feel like family. Mark even helped them load the 2 remaining kegs into each of their new SUV, and Assad invited Mark to come with them to the reception. Mark said he was coming home late from a game and he only stopped to check on the store because he thought someone might be breaking into the back. Besides, he was probably in trouble as it was, and if his dad caught him coming in any later, he'd get a beating. 15 minutes, Assad said. "I can't," Mark replied. "I'll let you drive," Assad shrugged. That was too good a deal to pass up. Driving a brand new SUV, at 13, was worth a beating. Assad was so drunk that Mark was glad to be driving, so after he out his bike in the back he threw him the keys and they were off. Mark slowly followed the other two Mercedes SUV in front of him. Assad was impressed at what a good driver Mark was, and Mark told him that his parents had a cabin up north and a Jeep with four-wheel drive, and his dad let him drive in a large circle around their property. Once they were at the hall where the reception was being held in, Mark followed Assad to his table. Then he was introduced to the bride and groom, which was a huge honor, and then they made their way to the buffet line. They ate together and Mark was even served wine. Assad was filling Mark in on the background of some of the more important people at the wedding. After he ate, the band began to play and Mark had drunk enough to walk to the center of the floor, and dance with two extremely attractive Mediterranean girls who were both several years older than himself. They were already on the dance floor, but that did stop him from getting in between the two of them. Well, before long, 15 minutes turned into 2 hours and it was way past midnight. Assad and his crew were playing cards in the back, and Mark was sobered up enough to hug Assad from behind and told him he had to get home. Assad looked at the clock and told him to stay and play poker with them, since he was already in trouble anyway. Assad said that he would even stake him, and handed Mark a fistful of $100 bills. Mark had never seen so much money on one table in his life. But Mark refused, shaking his head. Obviously you forgot about our gun trigger city prosecutor with a bad temper who would love to beat my underage ass for coming home drunk for embarrassing him publicly. Okay, just let me finish this hand and then I'll drive you home, Assad said. Unlike Mark, Assad had never stopped drinking. Assad, you're drunker than I am, Mark said. You can't drive, you shouldn't even be walking. Assad nodded his head like, you know, you might have something there. Most times Mark acted more like an adult that he did. The car's open. Mark kissed Assad on the cheek and said, hey, thank these guy for me, you throw a great party. Assad laughed, waved him off and spoke Arabic. Everybody at the table cheered and waved goodbye as he left. Never had Mark felt so adult in his entire life, all 13 years of it. After that, at least in Mark's eyes, Assad could do no wrong. Mark called his parents and told them what happened and that he was going to be late, and then he tried to sneak through the back door unnoticed, but his mom was waiting up. He had used mouthwash multiple times earlier before he left, but if either parent smelled alcohol even on his clothes there would be hell to pay. His mom was at the table but she was talking on the phone, so Mark waved from a distance, and told her that he was going to put his clothes in the washer, to avoid her. Are you hungry, Mark? She asked while she put her sister on hold. No, I'm fine mom, thanks. Are you sure? Yeah. Okay, well, pull out the knob. Then he snuck past her and scurried upstairs, almost tripping, as he stumbled his way to his bed. He didn't wake up until almost noon the next morning. It was no secret that Assad sold some of the best all-natural hand-dipped ice cream in the county. So, Jeannie's instinct about ice cream were spot on. What up, Assad? Mark said, giving him the peace sign sideways like some flaky hipster. Hey, what's up, Mark? Assad said, briefly looking up from his newspaper, and then he did a double take when he saw Jeannie with him. Assad had never seen Mark come into his store with a girl before. No, this was a woman. Hey, who's the princess? Assad asked, as he stood up and walked towards them. Then he eyed Jeannie up and down as if appraising a slave girl before a purchase. It was no secret that Assad loved white girls, especially white women with big tits and big asses, not unlike black men. And Assad's appraisal was not distracted by Mark's friendship or Jeannie's age. This is my girlfriend Jeannie, Mark said, and Jeannie, this is Assad, coolest Arab this side of Mecca. Hi, Assad, Jeannie said shyly, and when she raised her hand to wave, when she did, the sleeve of his jacket, which was too long, overlapped and dog-eared over the length of her hand. Girlfriend, Assad said doubtfully, I don't believe it. But it's true, Mark said, and then nudged Jeannie for validation. Jeannie, as if on cue, immediately hugged Mark dramatically, and even raised one leg off the floor, bending it at the knee. Assad laughed. Whoa, whoa, when did all this happen? He asked. Today, Mark said. Jeannie is a new student who just moved to our school. She lives next door, so I thought I would do the neighborly thing and show her around, Mark said. And that makes her your girlfriend? Assad asked. Hey, in your country, we would have to get married by now, Mark countered. Assad and Jeannie both laughed. Assad looked at Jeannie with a straight face, said, Ms. if you're being held against your will, just blink with one eye, and then Assad started blinking to show her how. He looked like a mad Arab, or a mad pirate. Now Mark and Jeannie laughed. How can you not love this guy? Mark said, facing her. Well, if this girl will have you, then you have my blessing, Assad conceded gracefully. Jeannie could feel her face turning red, and she tried to hide her embarrassment by whispering in Mark's ear. When she finished, Mark said, We would like 2 double scoops of your finest vanilla ice cream, my man. Soft cone or sugar? Assad asked. Sugar, Mark said. As Assad was leaving, Jeannie whispered in Mark's ear again. Oh yeah, and dip those in strawberry sprinkles please, Mark said as an afterthought. Assad gave him the okay sign as Mark got out his wallet. After Assad handed him the cones, Mark handed Jeannie hers, and asked him how much. On the house, Assad said graciously. I don't what to say, Mark replied. Say yes, Assad said. And let me add a thank you as well, Mark replied. Even better, Assad said. Can we go in the back? Mark asked. Yeah, sure, and then Assad addressed Jeannie specifically, Honey, don't let Mark make himself too comfortable back there, and then he started blinking again. Mark and Jeannie both laughed, and Jeannie promised Assad she wouldn't. Assad walked back to his stool, behind the register, where his newspaper and AM radio was broadcasting a news station in Arabic. It was low but discernible. Mark took Jeannie by the hand and led her in the back where the tables were.